cities around Vietnam, and people. We have people from 13 countries that have come here, and some were really easy. Like if you flew here from Singapore, I don't feel bad for you. That was really simple, and some seemed a lot more difficult with visas and long flight connections and things like that. So we're so pleased to have you. I want to thank, as I look at Moon and my other friends here, thank the companies that sponsored this event, which you can see on your name tag and on the screens on the stage. It's meaningful for us and helps put this together. Our purpose is to have an interesting discussion today. If it was up to me, as people know, we'd be in t-shirts and shorts instead of business attire. It's been pointed out that, yes, I forgot to wear a tie today. Two other people came up to me and said that they didn't know I even owned a suit, so I appreciate those compliments. We just wanted to get people here and gathered. I want to say hi to my friend, Mr. Hugh, who's joined us from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who is our very close partner in everything that we do around Vietnam. Assistant Minister Hong from MOFA is going to join us later this afternoon. We have friends from a couple other ministries here, and it's really a pleasure to see people. Finally, before I introduce Steve, I just want to give a warm welcome to all of my executive director colleagues who flew in from around the country and the region to join us here today. It's very meaningful to see everyone here, and I hope everyone has a good time, not only today, but for our big group going down to Hue tonight. We're going to have a great time. So let me invite up Steve Oken. Steve's the chair of AmCham's Asia Pacific. A lot of you certainly know him. He's a prominent figure on social media and in media around the region. Works for McClarty Associates, which is a consulting lobbying firm out of Washington. He's actually, I want to say, a four-time chair of AmCham's Asia Pacific, right? Fourth year, maybe?
Yes, it is.
Not in a row, but we're glad to have him back. And has been a frequent visitor to Vietnam over the years. And Steve and I have been friends since I had hair a long time ago, and but we haven't seen each other in a few years, so it's great to welcome you back. So Steve, thanks for coming and leading this organization.
Thank you. Thanks. Southeast Asia is the most strategic area within the U.S.-China competition right now. And so there's no better place to hold the first gathering of the AmChams coming together regionally since 2019. And as we hold the event today, right, we do this as President Biden arrives in Asia for his first presidential visit. And for that, I know we all applaud his personal commitment to the region, given everything that's going on with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the war there, given everything happening in the United States. He still finds time to come here to our region. He still finds the time to hold the first ever meeting of ASEAN leaders in Washington, D.C. And that sends a strong and needed message of the importance of the Asia-Pacific region to the U.S. national interest. Now, the President in the United States look to continue that positive momentum with its soon-to-be announcement of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which has many elements of great interest to the region, such as on digital trade. Now look, we could take a glass half-empty perspective by discussing what's not in the IPEF, and that, of course, is the U.S. joining the CPTPP. Nothing would do more for the U.S. economic interest and national security interest than coming back to that agreement. But we have to recognize the political reality in the United States that there are very few champions for trade right now. So what we do is commend the administration for trying something new and different. And they have to try something new and different because right now, Southeast Asia, besides being on China's home turf, China has even further advantages, such as entering into the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, an agreement that brings together Japan, Korea, China, Australia, New Zealand, and ASEAN. And this further integrates China into the economies of the region. Now, China wants to join the CPTPP as well. And so with the U.S. having no desire to join either, it must find other ways to compete. the U.S. has to find a way to engage in trade. It has been 10 years, it's been more than a decade since the U.S. entered a new trade agreement in this part of the world, and that was the U.S.-Korea FTA. So the best way to get back to the table as regional architecture gets drafted here is to enter into a digital trade agreement with as many partners as possible. The post-pandemic economy is going to be driven by digital trade. It's going to be driven by openness and interoperability and non-discrimination in the digital economy. That is what's going to make a difference. And the digital trade agreement, I see there's a lot of the sponsors here, AWS and Netflix. It's not just about them. Digital trade is about everybody. Digital trade is trade, and that's why it's so important for us to get that digital trade agreement. There's nothing stopping the U.S. from doing an early harvest within the IPEF on digital trade. With the U.S. hosting APEC next year somewhere in the United States, it would be a perfect time to get that digital trade agreement done. What we have to do as AmCham members across the region is give credit to the administration for trying this, for engaging with them as they approach the region, finding ways to help make the arguments about why engagement is important, why, while helping the region when it comes to COVID and when it comes to helping on infrastructure, we have to do more. And we have to take that argument back to Washington, D.C. as well. So this conference is so important, but this conference is just one in a line of what we do as the AmChams of Asia Pacific. We do virtual door knocks, which we started this year. Of course, because of COVID, it gives the chance to get us together with key decision makers and influencers from Washington, D.C. It gives a chance for AmChams like those in Myanmar and Cambodia and Bangladesh who might not have that access that those of us in Vietnam and Singapore regularly get to those decision makers. So we're going to continue that series, but we're going to have our first ever door knock in Washington, D.C. this summer as well. So I urge all of you to join so we bring the message from what we see in the region, that this is the area that is the most important when it comes to U.S.-China competition. The U.S. cannot make countries or businesses choose. It has to give the framework so that we will want to, both the countries and the businesses will want to do more and more with the United States, which is going to benefit our workers at home, it's going to benefit our businesses here, and it's going to benefit the U.S. national interest. Adam, thank you so much for all you've done. It's been very difficult. This is the latest we've ever had a summit because we kept pushing it back, and Adam timed it perfectly. So those of us who are coming here didn't have to take a COVID test before arrival. So Adam, just thanks for the timing. Thanks for all that you and your team have done. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here and hosting us last night and spending all this time with us. Thanks to the Vietnamese government officials for joining as well, because it's so important that we work together. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve, and thanks for giving me the credit on the timing. It was a pure coincidence. As you know, the lifting of the restrictions on COVID and the president's trip and the ASEAN summit and all had nothing to do with the date of this. We just tried to pick, as I said last night, we just tried to pick a date that we thought would be not in the summer, but late enough that hopefully people would actually get on planes and come here. So we do appreciate everyone. Moon, if I can invite you up here. Our next speaker is Moon Nguyen Phillips from Netflix. I think you guys have all heard of Netflix, and hopefully today, instead of watching Netflix, you'll pay attention to the discussions we have here. But then tonight, before you go to sleep, you can log on and watch your favorite shows. So Moon, come on up. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Adam, for being a great advocate for Netflix. So grateful for that. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Hanoi. I hope you're enjoying a little bit of autumn weather. At the beginning of Hanoi summer, this is very unusual, but it's very welcoming for all of us. My name is Moon Nguyen, Director of Public Policy for Southeast Asia, and also Head of Public Affairs for Asia Pacific at Netflix. We are delighted to be part of this important event right after the success of the US-ASEAN Special Summit in DC. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, the United States Ambassador to Vietnam, His Excellency Mark Knapper. Through Netflix engagement with governments around this region, I've had the pleasure of working with the ambassador and his team extensively. At Netflix, we are particularly focused on how we can support the development of this region's creative economy. As we chair the Creative Economy Councils at AmCham Thailand and AmCham Hanoi, we look forward to greater strides in the development of the regional and local creative economy. To have the US Ambassador to Vietnam here today is a great honor to all of us. I'm sure that Ambassador Napa needs no biographical introduction to most of you. A long-standing diplomat, he was most recently the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Korea and Japan at the US Department of State, and held posts across the region, including Seoul, Tokyo, and closest to my heart in Hanoi from 2004 to 2007, where he learned to speak Vietnamese fluently. Ambassador, it is an honor to introduce you this morning, and I would like to express mine and the American business community's appreciation for your and your team's extremely valuable support. Thank you, and welcome to the stage.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you, Moon, for that really kind introduction. Steve, thank you for convening us after how many years? 2 years? Something like 3 years. But it's really great. Thanks, John, Adam, your team for hosting us here in Hanoi. Charles Freeman, thank you for representing the Chamber all the way from Washington. It's really great to have everybody here. Thank you for joining us. And I think it's really, as Steve said, really appropriate to be doing this in such a dynamic place as Hanoi, where really the U.S.-Vietnam relationship has moved from, as all of you know, a history of conflict to one which we enjoy a comprehensive partnership, one that spans virtually every aspect of cooperative activities, from trade and investment to health, security, defense, people-to-people ties, education, science, technology. The list goes on and on. It really does reflect the breadth of our two countries' ties, and nothing could signify this better than Vietnam Prime Minister Ching's visit to the United States last week, which I was honored to be a part of. The Prime Minister, of course, was in Washington for the U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit, but he had a pretty, I won't say pretty, he had a very extensive bilateral program in Washington. I mean, it was almost like this carousel of senior American leaders, cabinet members, leaders of business who were coming to see him at the room at the Fairmont Hotel there in Washington. But we had secretaries of Commerce, Treasury, State. We had the head of AID, Samantha Power. We had National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The list goes on and on. He went up to Capitol Hill, saw Senator Leahy, saw a number of other senators interested in the relationship. So really, I think this visit, not just to Washington, but then on to Boston, New York, San Francisco, really did reflect, I think, this era in which the U.S. and Vietnam find ourselves, in which our relationship is just growing by leaps and bounds, and which we're looking, we hope, to upgrade to what the Vietnamese call a strategic partnership. And we have former Ambassador of the U.S. Ving here, where are you, Ambassador? Who has been an outspoken supporter of this relationship. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ving, for everything you do. But of course, last week's event in Washington was more than just a summit. It really was meant to celebrate, to commemorate 45 years of the U.S. relationship with ASEAN. We elevated our relationship with ASEAN to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The joint vision statement that we released lays out our shared vision for a freer, more prosperous, more interconnected, and more resilient Indo-Pacific. In this joint vision statement, we committed ourselves to collaborating on sub-regional issues involving the Mekong. We committed to deepening U.S.-ASEAN people-to-people ties. We committed to building better health, security, cooperation between the U.S. and ASEAN, and committed, of course, to the very important existential issue of climate change. The joint vision statement as well reaffirms our respect for the territorial integrity, sovereignty of Ukraine, as well as our deep concern over the crisis in Myanmar. And we announced $150 million in new regional initiatives. And through it all, we could not have done it without the work of the private sector. Between the Chamber of Commerce and the U.S.-ASEAN Business Council, we were able to have discussions between the ASEAN leaders and representatives of the U.S. private sector, who were able to really reflect and express their deep commitment to the region and their recognition of the dynamism and economic growth of the ASEAN region. Secretary Raimondo announced the largest U.S. trade mission in history called Trade Winds will be held in Thailand next year with sort of spin-off visits to 5 other countries. So stay tuned. We'll have more information on that. And we will have a trade mission, of course, to Vietnam as well later this year. And so we look forward, as we talk about elevating our partnership between the U.S. and ASEAN, we fully hope and expect that the U.S.-ASEAN business partnership will also be elevated. As Steve mentioned, we've got the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework coming up very soon. The expectation it'll be launched this Monday, May 23rd, when President Biden is in Tokyo. And it's really meant to deepen our relationships with the region. It's meant to reflect existing U.S. engagement already, but it's meant as well to reflect that there are challenges that aren't covered in normal trade agreements. Things like supply chain resilience, decarbonization, climate change resilience, digital economy, and so on. And so we're very pleased that the countries that have signed on and will be at the launch on Monday include Japan, South Korea, India, Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, New Zealand, and we're hopeful that a couple other countries whom we've invited will also be able to join us. And thank you, Steve, for taking the glass half full approach to IPEF. This framework is intended to be the centerpiece of the United States' economic strategy in the Pacific and will complement our national security goals in the region. And through the framework, we're looking to establish durable international engagements with the like-minded partners I just mentioned, which we hope will advance U.S. leadership and competitiveness in this fast-growing and commercially and strategically important region, supporting a level playing field for American farmers, ranchers, producers, manufacturers, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but globally. And finally, let me just say a few words about the really important work that all of you as AmCham members, AmCham leaders do every day. Your voices are the voices of American business. Your voices are the voices of the American people. Your work complements ours at U.S. missions throughout the region as we seek to grow bilateral trade and investment, as we seek to ensure a level playing field for our businesses, ensuring that we've got reciprocal and fair investment and trade, and ensuring that our American companies have an operating environment that reflects American values and honors our commitment to American workers and farmers to ensure that we're operating in a way that's fair and prosperous for them, and ultimately not just the American people, but the countries with whom we're trading and in whom we're investing. And so thank you again for coming. As Adam said, it's not easy. I mean, it's easier these days to travel, but we recognize that it is still a challenge to get across some borders. But thank you for coming and in recognition of just how important this event is after 3 years. Look forward to more activities today, tomorrow in Hue, and really do thank all of you for coming and for your attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you. We have a lot of AmCham leaders here today. As I look around, I want to just say that wanted to point out our friend from one of the newest AmChams in the region, which is the AmCham down in Da Nang on the Central Coast. Their chair, Chris Van Loon, is here. So, Chris, thank you very much for joining us and traveling up here today. And want to invite up now John Rockhold, who is our national chair of AmCham Vietnam, to come say a few words. John.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ambassador, and everyone here. Chris, great to have you up here with us. As Adam introduced, I'm from AmCham Vietnam, national chair this year. In this event also is one of our newest members, Vietnam Rare Earth. This is a very, I think, important trade area that Vietnam and the U.S. are working on. We're actually on July 20th in Washington, D.C. We will be holding a major event with the State Department, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the private sector to really look at the trade of rare earth and LNG. So it is my pleasure now to introduce the next speaker, excuse me, Undersecretary, sorry, it's all this jet lag. Under Secretary of Trade and Marissa Largo. Okay, Adam, that did it. Undersecretary Largo was appointed by the President Biden to lead the government in efforts to assist American businesses entering or expanding into the international markets and developing strategic that will shape the future. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce her. Yeah, I'm not going to try to speak much more.
Hello to those gathered in Hanoi and joining us from around the Asia-Pacific region. While I'm sorry not to be with you in person today, I am so looking forward to returning to Vietnam and to Indonesia next month to lead a clean energy technology trade mission. As somebody who has traveled and worked extensively in Southeast Asia, the region has a special place in my heart. My thanks to the Asia-Pacific AmChams for hosting me and for all that you do to support robust, free, and open commerce throughout the region. At the Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration, we are laser focused on helping U.S. businesses and workers to compete and to win globally. In pursuing that mission, we rely on your partnership to help us advance mutual goals and also your input to shape our approach. You are our eyes and ears on the ground in a fast-moving and challenging environment, and we appreciate your enthusiastic collaboration. Your Asia-Pacific AmCham business networks represent a region of vital economic and also of strategic interest, one that includes some of the world's most dynamic economies and fastest growing markets. It's a region where President Biden vowed to re-engage, and his administration is delivering on that promise. From his visit to Japan and South Korea in the coming days, to our tireless efforts to expand economic ties with allies and partners throughout the region. The centerpiece of the administration's economic efforts in the region is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or IPEF for short, which is our strategy to deepen commercial relations, advance shared economic policy priorities, and ensure mutual competitiveness. Together with partners in the region, we're establishing a framework that aims to ensure trusted data flows and continued technological leadership, to develop resilient and secure supply chains, to advance clean energy, decarbonization, and environmental sustainability, and to promote good governance and tax policy. In developing IPEF, our team is pursuing an inclusive approach with a flexible structure, with the goal of broadening participation throughout the Indo-Pacific region. We recognize that not every nation will be able to join each pillar of the IPEF framework, and we will continue to welcome consultations with any partner nation that aspires to match our level of ambition, even after the framework has been launched publicly. At the same time, we'll continue to pursue stakeholder consultations, including with businesses like those that you represent. We welcome your continued feedback on how to improve IPEF and ensure that it is mutually beneficial for U.S. stakeholders and for Indo-Pacific counterparts. To that end, earlier this month, I had the opportunity to hear from key stakeholders, from key members of the U.S. business community in Hong Kong during an off-the-record roundtable, and our team took to heart that group's candid comments on the challenges, but also the opportunities for IPEF. We also discussed prospects for another administration priority in the region, the Global Infrastructure Initiative that the President and his G7 counterparts announced last June. This Global Infrastructure Initiative aims to help meet the growing infrastructure gap across the developing world by offering a high standards, transparent alternative. By bringing together like-minded partners in support of crucial physical and digital projects, the Global Infrastructure Initiative will unify efforts and focus resources to spark transformative progress, including tackling the climate crisis, health security challenges, and the widening digital and gender divides. To support the Global Infrastructure Initiative, we are leveraging a whole-of-government approach, using our toolkit to identify prospective projects and deals where we can help U.S. companies to compete and win globally. We're pursuing advocacy with foreign governments, promoting U.S. business interests at the multilateral development banks, and connecting U.S. companies to opportunities related to bank-funded projects. On this initiative, too, your feedback is critical to informing our approach. My team and I look forward to continuing to engage with your AmChams as both IPEF and the Global Infrastructure Initiative come into sharper focus. At the same time, the International Trade Administration is advancing sector-focused strategies, like our forthcoming Clean Technology Export Competitiveness Strategy, which will boost exports of cutting-edge climate tech to help partner nations combat climate change while also creating jobs here at home in the U.S. I'm looking forward to driving forward that initiative when I visit Vietnam and Indonesia in early June for a clean technology-focused trade mission. Now, we're also continuing to work with partners across the Indo-Pacific region to advance shared policy objectives. This includes through multilateral fora like the Quad, the leaders of which will gather in Tokyo next week. It also includes ASEAN, the leaders of which President Biden welcomed to Washington last week for a special summit. And of course, we're continuing to advance our shared interest in the regions through our valued bilateral relationships. For instance, through the Japan-U.S. Commercial and Industrial Partnership, JUSIP for short, we're advancing cooperation on semiconductor supply chains, export controls, digital economy issues, and bilateral trade and investment. In Singapore, our U.S.-Singapore Partnership for Growth and Innovation is enhancing regional collaboration on standards, cross-border privacy rules, cybersecurity, and in key sectors. And in South Asia, the Department of Commerce is working with the government of India to revitalize our commercial dialogue and our CEO forum. The list goes on as we continue to build momentum, whether through formal frameworks or the constant diligence of the Foreign Commercial Service. The teams in 20 countries around the region, including Vietnam and Indonesia. My early June trade mission will kick off an incredibly busy year of ITA trade missions throughout Southeast Asia, including 2 additional trade missions planned for this year: a healthcare mission to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand in September of this year, and an advanced manufacturing mission to Indonesia, Singapore, and Japan in October. We hope that some of the companies that you represent will be joining us. I'm also pleased to share that just last week, Secretary Raimondo announced that TradeWinds, which is the Commerce Department's largest annual trade mission and business forum, will take place in Thailand in March of 2023. With spin-off visits to Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Vietnam, TradeWinds will promote business developments and opportunities for U.S. companies and prospective partners across the ASEAN region. I welcome your ideas for how we can maximize the TradeWinds Forum's impact and certainly invite you to join us in Bangkok in March. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to continuing our close collaboration to expand trade and to pursue our shared policy objectives. Thank you.
It was great to have her participate virtually. I saw that sometimes her mouth was moving before the words came out, and like a DVD from 15 years ago that we used to watch here. But it's so great to have the Undersecretary involved, and we have such a great relationship with our folks at the Department of Commerce and their foreign commercial colleagues here on the ground. I just want to make note and acknowledge all the commercial officers that are joining here today from 6 or 7 countries that have come here. John, thank you very much for setting that up. John's the kind of regional head of that and coordinates that. We work so closely with them here in our embassy here in Hanoi. Our next speaker, you guys all know, it's Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and the Pacific, Dan Crittenbrink. He was our ambassador here in Vietnam from 2017 until earlier last year, about a year ago. Then he went back to Washington. I think people know him all over the region. He's tackled some of America's kind of thorniest challenges. He worked on North Korea policy. He was at the NSC, very involved in setting up President Obama's trip to the region when he was out here. And he's joined us. He was going to join us live, and he got pulled into President Obama's trip to Korea that is just about to start right now. So he's joined us virtually, and if we could go ahead and welcome Assistant Secretary of State, Daniel Crittenbrink.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Crittenbrink. I'm the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs at the United States Department of State. I want to thank the AmChams of Asia Pacific for hosting this crucial business summit, which couldn't come at a more important moment. As an Indo-Pacific country, the United States and its businesses have a crucial role to play in shaping the rules of the road that govern 21st century economic activity. I, of course, wish I could be there in person, but I also know that you are all in very good hands with one of our finest diplomats, U.S. Ambassador Mark Napper. We both understand that the prosperity of everyday Americans is linked to the Indo-Pacific. Thanks in large part to the efforts of everyone participating in today's event, the United States trade and investment relationship with the region is deep and robust. The Indo-Pacific is important to the United States and to the world. The region includes 7 of the top 15 U.S. export markets. Two-way trade between the United States and the region was over $2 trillion in 2021, and that's more than our trade with Europe and also within North America. It also supports more than 5 million Indo-Pacific jobs. Foreign direct investment from the United States totaled more than $969 billion in 2020 and has nearly doubled in the last decade. The United States remains the #1 investment partner in ASEAN member states, investing in 2020 more than Southeast Asia's next 3 investment partners combined. And the United States is the primary exporter of services to the region, which in turn fuels regional growth. We are present in the region and we have a great story to tell. But we also recognize that our partners are looking for more engagement from us. President Biden's Indo-Pacific strategy, the administration's first regional strategy, addresses this front and center. The strategy is affirmative and built upon shared values for an Indo-Pacific that is free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. We are vigorously promoting our strategic engagement in the Indo-Pacific region. President Biden is starting his trip to South Korea and Japan today. Vice President Harris went to Singapore and Vietnam on her first trip outside North America last August. And just last week, we wrapped up the U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit here in Washington, D.C. that was a tremendous success. Secretary Blinken, of course, visited the region in February, following a previous trip to the region in December when he spoke at length on the U.S. vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific in Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. And I've already visited the region 6 times since I started in this position in September of last year. Let me now say a few words on the U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit. The summit was held for the first time at the White House, and President Biden reaffirmed the United States' enduring commitment to Southeast Asia while also underscoring the importance of U.S.-ASEAN cooperation to ensuring security and prosperity for our combined 1 billion people and for the broader international community. The United States and Southeast Asia particularly benefit from our far-reaching commercial and trade ties. ASEAN represents the world's 4th largest market, and with nearly 2,000 U.S. companies, including some of your own, headquartered in the region. U.S. businesses collectively support more than 1 million Southeast Asian jobs. President Biden announced a wide range of initiatives at the summit that will deepen U.S.-ASEAN relations, strengthen ASEAN centrality, and expand our common capacity to achieve our shared objectives. Most significantly, the United States and ASEAN will commemorate the 45th anniversary of U.S.-ASEAN dialogue relations by establishing a U.S.-ASEAN comprehensive strategic partnership, which will be marked by expanded engagement on health, energy, climate, transportation and sustainable infrastructure, women's empowerment, and more. We were also very excited to announce President Biden's nominee for the new U.S. ambassador to ASEAN, Johannes Abraham. Johannes is a great friend, a great American, and he is going to do an outstanding job as America's ambassador to ASEAN. He is the first nominee for this role since 2016, and because we believe personnel is policy, if confirmed again, I'm confident that Johannes will play an invaluable role in deepening our engagement in the region. Turning to Indo-Pacific prosperity, the United States is working with like-minded partners across the region to develop an Indo-Pacific economic framework to deepen economic relations, coordinate approaches to global economic challenges, and advance broadly shared economic growth. The IPEF is not a traditional trade agreement. It is a new framework and an opportunity to advance a worker-centric trade policy. It includes novel areas that are most consequential to future economic prosperity, and it goes well beyond traditional trade agreements. That includes digital trade to unleash the power of information technology to conduct new kinds of commerce and create new jobs. Strengthening supply chains to protect against future harm and unlock new economic opportunities for countries in the region. Clean energy and infrastructure to put our economies on a sustainable climate footing and create opportunities for new industries and jobs. And promoting high standards, including in labor and the environment, and best practices in governance, including tax and anti-corruption efforts. We anticipate that IPEF will be open and inclusive to those partners that share our ambitions and commitment to high standards. Now, this is where all of you can help. As we begin in-depth substantive discussions on the IPEF pillars, we want to hear the business community's feedback. We continue to develop and refine IPEF, especially through robust engagement with all interested stakeholders, and this will help us better define our goals and desired outcomes. APEC, and especially our host year in 2023, is another vitally important platform for the United States to advance economic policies in support of free, fair, and open trade and investment, and inclusive and sustainable growth. Throughout our host year next year, we will seek to advance an innovative and practical economic policy agenda that benefits workers, businesses, and families in the United States and across the region. We have a terrific opportunity to utilize APEC to advance several priorities this year, including on services, the digital economy, structural reform, sustainable economic growth, and women's economic empowerment. For all these reasons and more, the United States was proud to confirm in February that we will serve as APEC host in 2023. While we remain, of course, in the early stages of our planning, our objective is to take full advantage of our 2023 host year to continue multilateral collaboration with like-minded partners, advocate for and uphold the international economic system, and showcase the relevance of APEC engagement to promote American and regional prosperity. We want to remain in close contact with the business community to identify priority areas of work and to broaden APEC's engagement with stakeholders to ensure a successful host year. And over the last 8 months, the Quad, which is the grouping of 4 key Indo-Pacific democracies, has cemented itself as an active partnership committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our expanded cooperation includes a range of economic issues, including infrastructure cooperation, climate and clean energy, and critical and emerging technologies. The Quad foreign ministers met February 11 in Melbourne and issued the first ever ministerial joint statement. President Biden, of course, is again meeting with Quad leaders in Tokyo in just a few short days. Well, and that is to say nothing about the breadth and depth of our bilateral engagements throughout the region. Between the United States and Japan, of course, we're deepening our competitiveness and resiliency, or core partnership, while with our Australian allies, we have a strategic commercial dialogue. These are but only a few of our many deepening economic relationships in the region. So, to sum it up, the United States continues to be heavily invested in every sense of the word in the Indo-Pacific region, and we plan only to expand our economic commitment further. And I think the key thing about all of this is that this builds on the long-standing, decades-long U.S. engagement in the region, builds on the work of previous administration, and of course it takes advantage of what we see as a very broad bipartisan consensus in the United States on the importance of the region, including the very strong people-to-people ties that are part of anchoring us across the region and anchoring our status as an Indo-Pacific country. Thank you so much for including me today. I wish you a successful conference.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Secretary. As you heard, the U.S. just wrapped up this U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit, and we had a lot of our AmCham leaders go on that trip. One of them just got back about 8 hours ago, our Vice Chair, Virginia Foote. So, Ginny, if I could invite you up to have a chat with somebody who was also very well known to this group, the former U.S. Trade Representative, Michael Froman, who's now at MasterCard, and wants to talk a little bit about trade and investment in the region.
I think Adam got me a chair so that I don't keel over at some point. We wanted to tie in a bit of the past. We are all, I think, those of us in the region doing business here are terribly sorry that TPP did not end up including the United States on our own decision. But I think we've learned some things from TPP and hope can be incorporated into the IPAF. There are many trade agreements in the region. Vietnam, many of our countries are involved in free trade agreements. Ambassador Froman was the chief U.S. negotiator during the many years of the TPP. He was head of USTR during those years, many years, for the Obama administration. He was ambassador at USTR in that last, what was it, maybe 9 months or something after the agreement was signed and before the administration was over, and we failed to get it through the Senate, so it was not ratified at the very end. But Ambassador Froman has gone on to run strategic issues for MasterCard. He's very active in the trade and business community in Washington. Many of you in your various countries, many of us here in Vietnam worked with him extensively during the TPP negotiations. So we're delighted that he's here, sort of, virtually. First, I wanted him to, again, sort of take us back a little bit. All of us living overseas, working overseas, we see the lack of a free trade agreement. But my first question to him is, how does he see trade policy evolving sort of in the absence of FTAs? So, Adam, are you?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with this group. I have many fond memories of all the times that we've met over the years. And I want to thank Ginny in particular for continuing to shepherd these issues, these really important issues, over the course of many, many years. I think when it comes to trade policy, clearly there has been an evolution in how people are thinking about globalization. I don't think we're really seeing deglobalization per se, but I think we have seen the end of uber globalization, where efficiency was the main criteria of how people thought about the international trading system. Now there's a lot more focus on security, on resilience, and on the domestic implications of trade policy. And I think that's healthy, because over time, trade policy can only move forward if there is sufficient domestic support for it. And that means really paying attention to how to ensure that there's inclusive growth and that everybody is benefiting from growth and that the benefits of growth are broadly shared. So we're seeing that renewed focus on both the domestic element of inclusive growth and on the supply chains becoming more resilient, more redundant, more secure as time goes on.
Thank you, Mike. Second question is a little bit of a play off of that to what you see, especially being in Washington working on trade policy issues. How do you see the IPAF shaping trade policy going forward and how to include other countries as it moves forward?
Well, I think it is a potentially very important initiative. Most importantly, it means the U.S. is returning to the table. It's re-engaging with the region on economic issues as it has on security and on political issues, and that it is willing to engage and to show leadership in an important region that is so critical for the U.S. economy and for the economies of the countries across the area. So first and foremost, that is the most important aspect of it. I also think the agenda that the IPEF is initially focused on is compelling. It's about the digital economy, it's about supply chains, it's about issues that are front and center right now in the minds not only of the American leadership, but of leaders across the Asia-Pacific region.
Great. I think we're all hoping that that is how it plays out. Certainly the years of negotiating on TPP, there were carrots and sticks. The carrots were reducing tariffs for all of the countries. For Vietnam, it was especially important because the tariffs were quite high in many areas that are really important to Vietnam for exporting to the U.S. But there are no carrots in IPAF. So one of the questions has been, how do we entice the countries like Vietnam, but a lot of the other ASEANs and many of the countries you all are here from, to sign up to commitments on labor, environment, and digital? If we have no carrots and we don't want to use the stick, how do we entice participation in those issues?
You know, I think it's important to remember that in the context of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, half the countries sitting around the table already had free trade agreements with the United States. It wasn't market access to the United States that was driving their participation. It was wanting to be at the table, shaping the rules of a high standard trading system that would define the dynamics of this critically important region. And I think that holds true for the IPEF as well. It's a real opportunity to sit down with the United States as well as other countries across the region and work on setting high standards at this critically important time.
One of the things that we talked about a lot in Washington and New York, Boston, San Francisco, where else did we go? That's it, I guess, was to really get the business community supportive of IPAF. We all worked very hard on TPP and are still a bit cross that it never passed. And maybe there are lessons to be learned from that process. Did we not move fast enough in Congress? Did we not have the political support we needed? And what can the business community do to make sure that we are at the table, our voices are supportive, we don't just play the sour grapes, which we all feel the sour grapes, but how do we be sure that the business community is supportive and participating in IPAF?
Well, I don't think it's politically realistic to focus on bringing the U.S. back into TPP or CPTPP, you know, at the current time. The politics just have evolved since then, and I would focus instead on seeing what can be done through the IPEF to further engage with the United States on these issues and to engage the United States with the governments in the region around these issues. I think that will be really the most promising avenue for showing leadership and bringing these countries together across the Asia-Pacific.
Great. Finally, Ambassador, you now with your MasterCard hat, in terms of digital and financial transformation, which are obviously very important to a company like MasterCard, but Visa, banks, and really these are tools that all companies need and use. How do you feel, or do you feel, we can make progress on establishing some global standards, sort of in the, I guess IPEF is more like APEC in the sense that it's looking for global standards. Do you see that we'll be able to make progress in some of these areas?
I think global standards are critical, and I think it's not just about the efficiency of being able to run a business in a consistent way across the world, but it's really about using those standards to raise the rules of the game, to establish rules of the game that reflect our values and our interests. And we see the benefits of that in one sector after another. You know, I think the work that's been done between the U.S. and the EU on the new transatlantic data privacy agreement, I think that's an important step forward. And the work that's been done by various countries in the region, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, others, on digital economy partnerships. I think that's also been an important part of setting standards. So particularly for the digital economy, it is critically important that we figure out how together to establish standards for protecting consumer privacy, absolutely important, but for also being able to take advantages of the innovation that comes from having data analytics and the single standards in a way that works for people and for governments across the region.
Great. Thank you so much, Ambassador. And wish you were here, but I'm sure you'll be here again soon. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know the feeling, believe me. Our next guest traveled here from far away, as you heard before, all the way from Washington. He is a tireless advocate on behalf of the U.S. business community in our region. He is an expert. I have a whole bio for Charles, but I know everyone knows him. So, Charles, with your permission, I'm not going to read the whole thing since we're 8 minutes behind schedule. But he's a senior vice president for Asia at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Charles follows all of your countries. He knows everyone in all your countries. He's got just a broad background, journalist, academic, business, think tanks. You name it. If there's someone out there that's an expert in this region, chances are that they rely on Charles for advice and that they know him. And Charles, I want to thank you for coming so far and joining us today. It's meaningful for a whole group, so I welcome you. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. It is so great to be here. I cannot tell you, I was listening to Undersecretary Lago earlier say, I wish I could be there in person. And I think many of us have been using that line for the last couple of years, and it really is fantastic to be here in person, I have to say. There's no really comparable experience. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Steve Oken, for telling my boss I had to be here, but I was glad to do it. And it's great to see so many friends and friendly faces around the room. The IPEF. Hi, Mary. The IPEF is clearly a second best choice to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The U.S. Chamber and our members continue to burn a candle for rejoining TPP. And despite, I think, what Ambassador Froman said, I think, there was a missed opportunity here to rejoin because the politics, notwithstanding, the fact that, there are politics surrounding the TPP, to the extent that the labor community wanted to object to TPP and the Biden administration felt the need to cater to that constituency. The administration has already done a lot and has the political capital if they wanted to use it to rejoin TPP. And I've talked to a lot of people in the government and in politics that say, yeah, we actually could have gotten this done. But putting that aside, the IPEF, again, there are some really useful potential things to come out of it. And, at the end of the day, all of us really just want to achieve a business environment that is more flexible, more certain, and easier across borders. And there's a lot that can be done even without, a change in U.S. laws that would be required as a part of a comprehensive free trade agreement. If you look at the 4 pillars of IPEF, meaning and I keep having to remember what they are. The fair trade, fair and resilient trade, supply chain resiliency, energy transition, and tax and anti-corruption. Within those four pillars, there is a lot that can be done, irrespective of the lack of, again, a negotiated comprehensive trade agreement that has the force of law. The chamber, if you're interested, on our website we produced a wish list of sorts for the IPAF, and the goal here for us is to continue to further discussions that lead, eventually we hope, to a return to a more traditional kind of negotiated free trade agreement. But we're not allowed to say that because that's verboten in Washington. Nevertheless, if you look at the digital piece, there's enormous opportunities there. And frankly, governments, not just in this region, but globally, are backtracking a little bit, not just a little bit, but backtracking on the maintenance of an open digital environment. And the United States really has an opportunity to work with countries around the region, including Vietnam, to develop a framework and to put in place a framework that works for all of us. There has been some concern from parts within the U.S. government that a digital agreement really only benefits, the GAFA companies, Google, Amazon, et cetera. But we've actually done a deep dive on, who would benefit from a digital agreement, and by and large, it's small and medium-sized enterprises and individuals doing business across borders. So there's a lot that the U.S. can gain. Those of us who thought trade was already worker-centric, now can pivot and say, well, actually, this has some real positive benefits for workers and businesses in the United States as well as around the region. The supply chain resiliency, as Jenny and others have said, we're moving away from, and Mike said, we're moving away from pure efficiency and building in, questions related to economic security, which now the U.S. has adopted as a framework of its own. And so there's much there that can be done. The energy transition, particularly as long as the administration does not write off the notion that LNG can be a very significant part of the energy transition, lower carbon as opposed to no carbon, but a very important thing to do, and governments around the region are looking for some assistance from the United States to build those facilities that enable that energy transition. And finally, in tax and anti-corruption, the COVID has not been kind to those of us that would prefer what's the Chinese expression is, fish can't swim in muddy water, but the United States has been trying to clean up the water so we can see the fish for a long time, and the COVID situation really muddied the waters on corruption in particular in the region, I think, and it's something that we need to get back to the table on. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And despite the fact that many of us in Washington spend half our time, making, crass remarks about the administration and, pointing to this and that reason for cynicism, the fact remains that, A, this is the only game in town, so we're going to play it. And second of all, there's really some very positive things just about the United States getting back to the table. So we're thrilled about that. We want to work with all of you to make sure that the voices from the region are reflected effectively in the IPEF conversations. We really want to make sure that that our negotiators, who now have been named, look to not just develop new sticks as part of the IPEF, but build the carrots that everybody wants to see. So with that, thank you very much. Again, it's great to be here. And Adam, really